It is essential to return evil for evil. You can't just get rid of the witchcraft by doing good things. You have to attack and harm the witch. For it to really be effective, the witch must be destroyed. And that counter witchcraft should be lethal. And we have to remember that the unwitcher who's performing these rituals is in a psychic battle, and they might die. It's either the witch is going to die or the unwitcher is going to die. So they hope that their own personal power and force will allow them to not be killed in their battle with the witches. So, in fact, we have 5 different unwitchers that met with the Babans at different periods of time. Interestingly, they accept all of them. They interpret all of the pronouncements of all 5 of the witches and apply all of them. So they really are able to, it's not like they pick and choose. It's just they find a way to craft their story to fulfill all of the predictions of these different witches, even though these unwitchers were unable to help them. In spite of seeing so many unwitchers, Jean Brabant actually says he does not much believe. But then again, he's constantly manifesting disturbance, the signs of being bewitched, his drinking, his anxiety, his the sleeplessness, his impotence. So, in fact, one of the unwitchers says that if they don't resolve the witchcraft, Jean Babon will kill himself, that he will die of suicide. So remember, once again, when someone is bewitched, this is a fight to the death. It's a zero-sum game. Everything that person loses, the bewitched loses, is gained by the witch. And everything the witch is harmed by actually kind of goes to the unwitcher, in fact. But that unwitcher and that witch will be locked. And if that doesn't work, if the unwitcher is killed, or if an unwitcher never comes and unwitches Jean Babon, his death is all but certain. All right. Now, I wanted to note that the witchers are not of any single gender. While Favret-Saada writes mostly about women unwitchers that she works with closely, she encountered more unwitchers in general that were men. Now, we see that Josephine, Jean Babon's wife, is not affected specifically by the witchcraft afflicting Jean Babon, though she and her family have a long history of experiencing and resolving witchcraft. Favret-Saada explains that there's a pattern in which Josephine and her family would leave their farm, which they didn't do very often, but they'd go out into the world for a funeral, for instance, and they would have to be in social contact with others. Being in social contact with others means they contact witches. So when they return home, their animals start getting sick due to being bewitched. And how do they know it's actually witchcraft and not something else? When they feed the animals holy salts, special holy salts, then it goes away. So it has to be witchcraft. It's sort of self-fulfilling. Now, our unwitchers, in fact, they make the rounds. They come and hang out. They'll come once a week, pretty regularly, to make pronouncements. They will come to give little bags of salt or little small amulets and bent nails that are used as sort of like fetishes to ward off the witches. So the relationship becomes close and open. And in fact, the people who are bewitched really come to trust and disclose very personal details to the unwitcher. I mean, after all, the unwitcher is willing to die for them. Engaging in unwitching always has below it the fear that you will be killed by the witch that you battle. They're wholly committed to the supernatural battle. They're courageous and they come regularly. Unlike these eccentric unwitchers who make up crazy stuff, treat somebody like once, and then never interact with them again. It's an ongoing sort of experience. And the relationship continues, as Favret-Saada will explain, is after someone is fully unwitched, they will still have time with the unwitcher. They will still see the unwitcher. The unwitcher will still come around. Now, what's interesting to me is that the witch is also thought to make rounds, to come around the house, maybe at night, depositing charms, touching victims. And that's also what the unwitcher does. They speak and they visit, and they also deposit charms and counter sorcery. In this way, they have just this sort of social similar pattern. The witch and the unwitcher do very similar things. And of course, it does seem that for a witch to be under the power of an unwitcher, they would look as if they were regularly bewitched. So how do the unwitchers and the witches relate to one another? They relate very similarly. They're very similar creatures in many ways. The unwitcher actually exists and actually does stuff, and the witch, well, the witches are always innocent because there are no witches. So when a witch dies, they're rushed to the hospital, and they'll notice very quickly that their family, the witch set, that family will decline and fail. That means that the unwitching has worked. So the unwitching rituals and whatnot are going on, and they're watching their proposed witches to see if they start declining and having problems. In fact, a witchcraft accusation leads to antisocial behavior. Whether the witch is accused knows that they've been accused or not, suddenly, their neighbors aren't going to talk to them. And the bewitched will start locking up their property in ways that they didn't before, trying to keep the witch out. So even if you don't know that you're being accused of a witch, you'll notice that people are acting very strangely. Now, one can talk about a witch to an unwitcher, and they can talk kind of the people in their family that are also bewitched or in the system, but they cannot name the witch publicly. The witch's identity must be kept private and never spoken, out of fear for ridicule and out of fear that the witch will become angry because they've been named and become even more malevolent. Now, I'm really curious about page 168. On page 168, we read about a little fetish, a little pouch that one of the unwitchers has given to the Babans. Now, Favret-Saada calls this a copula. Like I said, to copulate, a copula, because it's connected to their marriage. And it's thought that as long as they have this little bag, their marriage will be fine. So let's read about this. Josephine had put the parcel, Josephine had put the parcel, well tied up by the unwitcher, in a tin that had held cattle medicine. She had been afraid that in time it would deteriorate. The Babans never thought of opening it till then, and they discovered its contents with me. I untied the strings and wrapping paper and discovered 7 plants, of which they could only name 4: pimpernel, fern, laurel, and box. They were wrapped around 2 metallic objects, a bit of harvester blade. In fact, it's made of steel, very strong. I always have some on me. Witches don't like steel, commented Josephine, and a horseshoe nail, a nail from a horseshoe. The nails have to be heated over a fire. She heats them, then bends them with her teeth, and she bends the little pointed bit to avert the witch's force and prevent him from perforating the body of the bewitched. We read earlier that the bent nail is like a bending of the witch's vitality, so it can't move towards those who she is bewitched. She says, "Look, it's not bent," says the astonished Jeanne, who from that moment on seemed totally perplexed. What indeed was one supposed to think of this paradox? Their unwitcher, the woman from Iz, had refused to unwitch him in the pretext that he was too caught. He was too caught for this woman from Ize. But she had then put a straight nail, not a bent nail, into the parcel. This is usually used with those who are only caught by a small spell. But this woman from Ize said it's a big spell that he's caught by. And he also knew that the protective bag she made him wear next to his skin contained a bent nail as well as holy salt and plants. The absolute proof that in the eyes of the unwitcher, he was caught tight. When I finished examining the parcel's contents, Josephine packed it up quickly without taking any particular precautions or even tying it up again. All the contents were pushed randomly into the tin box, which she put back in the cupboard. Now, this shows that they believe Favret-Saada had some sort of incredible force that she would be let to see, touch, and even unwrap this thing. So that's further, she's unwittingly leading them on to believe that Favret-Saada is a powerful unwitcher. So they're really trying, the Babans are, to get her to work as an unwitcher. And at one point, she even accepts a gift of a fowl, of a chicken. However, she realizes that this relationship is not going well, so she needs to leave. So she leaves and doesn't talk to the Babans again for 16 months. Then we'll see what happens next. All right, take a little break.